It was an autumn evening when I found myself walking down the familiar little street I hadn't seen in years. The same old saw trees lined the sidewalks, their leaves falling quietly to the ground. At the end of the street, the corner cafe still glowed warmly, a small dot of light in the cool darkness. I stopped without knowing why. Perhaps it was because of the faint tune drifting out from inside, the same song we used to listen to together. The wooden door still creaked softly whenever someone pushed it open. The smell of roasted coffee mixed with damp wood carried me back to those nights long ago when I was younger, when I still believed that every meeting in life happened for a reason. I chose a seat by the window where I could see the rain-slick street outside, couples walking under umbrellas, and the lights shimmering on the wet pavement like a blurred mirror. The waitress was a young woman with a gentle smile. She asked what I'd like to drink, and I answered, almost out of habit, "A black coffee. Less sugar, please." She nodded, smiled again, and walked away. I looked around. Everything seemed almost the same. The piano in the corner still stood there, though now it was covered with a thin layer of dust. On the wall hung black and white photos of the old city, one of them showing this very cafe, filled with strangers talking under the same warm yellow light. I wondered if someone, years from now, might look at me today and remember me the same way, in a picture, frozen in a quiet evening like this. My coffee arrived, steaming lightly. I stirred it, listening to the sound of the spoon tapping against the cup. A small sound, but oddly comforting. Outside, the rain began to fall harder. Then someone stepped in, soaked through, her coat dripping, hair damp and clinging to her face. I looked up, and for a moment, my heart stopped. It was her, still the same small figure, the same gentle eyes, only now touched by a hint of tiredness. She looked around, her gaze landing on me, just for a second. Then she smiled, the smile I used to know so well. I didn't know what to say. She walked to the table beside mine, sat down, and ordered a latte, just like before. Between us hung a quiet silence, strangely comfortable, as if all that had happened between us was just a dream, long past. I hadn't planned to speak, but she turned first, her voice soft. "You still like this spot, don't you?" I nodded. "Yeah, from here you can see the street. It's peaceful." She smiled, looking out at the rain. "You once said you liked sitting here because you were waiting for someone to walk by. Remember?" I chuckled softly. "I didn't think you'd remember that." "There are things," she said quietly, "that we never try to remember, but never forget." We sat like that for a long time. Neither of us asked the usual questions. "How have you been? Are you happy? Is there someone new?" Words felt unnecessary. Some encounters, I thought, happen just to remind us that after everything, we can meet again without pain. I looked at her. Her eyes were calmer now, no longer hiding sorrow or innocence, just peace, like the surface of a still lake. She told me she was moving to another city, far away, somewhere by the sea, where she believed every morning could be a new beginning. "Are you happy?" I asked. She looked at me and nodded slightly. "I think I am. At least I feel lighter now." I said nothing. Sometimes happiness doesn't need proof. It's enough just to see that someone has found their peace. When she stood up to leave, she turned to me. "Thank you," she said, "for being here once." I didn't know how to reply. I just nodded. She walked out into the rain, her small figure fading into the distance, her white umbrella blending into the mist. I stayed for a while longer, The coffee had gone cold, but I didn't feel cold at all. Perhaps because something inside me had quietly closed. Outside, the rain kept falling, each drop hitting the window with a rhythm like the city's quiet heartbeat. I watched the lights blur through the glass, heard the sound of a distant motorbike, and thought, maybe everyone has a cafe like this, a place that holds old memories, a place to return to one evening, sip a cup of coffee, and accept that some things will never come back, and that's okay. I stood, left some money on the table, and stepped outside. The rain had stopped. The wind brushed lightly through my hair. I walked along the wet pavement, listening to the sound of my footsteps echoing in the night. Everything looked the same, but I was different. I turned back once more. The cafe lights were still glowing, warm, quiet, and steady, like a farewell from the past. Maybe I'd never return there again, but I knew that somewhere inside me, that light would always remain, a small corner of warmth for everything that once was, for the people who walked with us for a time, however short or long, because sometimes loneliness isn't something to fear. It's just a pause, a quiet moment to remind ourselves that we once loved, once lost, once lived fully, and only when we accept that truth can we truly find peace. Stranger, on the night train. The train left the station close to midnight. I wasn't used to traveling by train, but that night, for some reason, I chose it. Maybe I just wanted to watch the city fade slowly through the window, to have a few hours where no one expected anything from me, where my thoughts could drift without explanation. The station was quiet, the air was cold and damp, and the yellow lights cast long shadows on the platform. I pulled my suitcase along the corridor, chose a nearly empty carriage, and sat by the window. The train started to move, slowly at first, the metal wheels grinding softly against the rails, like the steady heartbeat of the night. Next to me sat a woman in her 30s. She held a small notebook tightly in her hands. When the train began to move, she looked up and smiled faintly. I nodded back. We didn't speak, only listened to the rhythmic sound of the train cutting through the dark. Outside, the scenery slipped away. The lights along the tracks blurred into small, glowing dots in the distance. She had a calm face, without makeup, her eyes bright yet quiet. She wore a light brown wool coat, and her hands never left the notebook, as if it carried a part of her soul. After nearly an hour, she opened the notebook, glanced at a few lines, then closed it again. Something about that small motion made me curious, but I hesitated to ask. Perhaps she noticed my glance, because she turned and said softly, "Are you traveling far?" "Not really," I said. "Just going back to my old city." She nodded, smiling. "I'm going a bit farther. This trip might be my last." "Your last?" I asked. She looked out the window, her reflection faint in the glass. "Yes, there are places you know you'll never return to, not because you hate them, but because your heart has changed." Her words sank into me like cool water running through an old scar, gentle, but it lingered. We sat in silence for a while, the train's whistle echoing in the distance. I finally asked, "What do you write in that notebook?" She smiled. "Little things. I often write when I travel by train. Each trip is a small chapter." "About people you meet?" I asked. "Sometimes," she said, "but mostly for myself. On trains, I feel like I belong nowhere, just passing through people's lives, like a shadow that drifts by." Her words made me think of all the faces I had seen once and never again. Maybe they didn't remember me, but I still carried fragments of those moments, like faded photographs inside my mind. We began to talk more. She told me she used to work at a small publishing house, but she left after the man she loved married someone else. She said it calmly, no bitterness, no drama, just like telling a story from long ago. I asked, "Do you regret it?" She shook her head. "No. If it weren't for him, I wouldn't have known I could love someone that deeply." I nodded, then said quietly, "I had someone like that too." She looked at me. "Do you still remember her?" I smiled faintly. "I do, but I don't want to go back. Still, when I hear a certain old song, something inside me softens." She nodded slowly. "It's like hearing the sound of a night train, something that's leaving and returning at the same time." Rain began to fall outside. Droplets slid down the glass, leaving long, trembling trails. For a moment, I realized that loneliness isn't always something to fear. Sometimes it's just a station where the train pauses, quiet, temporary, waiting for the next soul to arrive. The train stopped at a small station. She stood, picked up her suitcase. I looked at her, feeling a faint ache of regret. She turned, smiling gently. "Thank you for talking with me," she said. "Maybe I'll write you into this notebook. Will I be the hero or just a passerby?" I asked. She laughed softly. "A kind passerby." Then she stepped off the train, her figure fading into the drizzle and the dim yellow lights of the platform. I kept watching through the window until all I could see was rain and the blur of light. When the train started moving again, I leaned against the window, listening to the rhythmic sound of the wheels. I wondered whether I had been a brief chapter in someone's story or if someone had written me into a forgotten page of their own. By the time we reached the final station, dawn had broken. The sunlight spread across the damp ground, pale but gentle. I stepped off the train, breathing deeply. The city was the same, noisy, crowded, yet my heart felt lighter. Maybe it was because I had spoken out loud the things I usually kept to myself. Maybe it was because sometimes it takes a stranger to help you understand your own heart. As I walked out of the station, I thought about how life is just a series of unplanned train rides. People get on, people get off. You never know who will sit beside you next. But in those brief hours, you might share a